East Coast, there are mayors, many of them Republicans, who are being told, you've got to move these houses back away from the ocean. You've got to lift them up. Climate change is going to raise the water levels on a permanent basis. If you want your town insured, you have to do this. In the real world, Barack Obama's policies work better.
In the real world, Barack Obama's policies work better. An update, by the way, in my neighborhood, we are not the only house now with an Obama sign. As I drove home from taking Allison to school this morning, I noticed one of the big houses down the street also now has 2 Obama signs up. All right, we're making progress. But I go back to the warnings from friends of mine who are organizers like Greg, who say, look, yard signs don't vote. It just means that the Romney campaign is wasting time and resources in placing these yard signs. And in fact, somebody on this email list that I'm on said something about the fact that this Democratic household was getting all these Romney mailers. And I realized, you know what? Me too. Yes, I am a registered Democrat. I registered as a Democrat only in 2004, so I could vote in that primary. In 2004, yes, so I could vote in that primary, and or 2008, maybe it was. Anyway, yeah. Oh, Robert Hill made a good point. Says Romney signs were put there en masse by a single volunteer. Your Obama and your neighbor's Obama sign were put there by an individual who actively sought it out. That's very true. But anyway, what I was saying is, I forget what I was saying. Oh, I'm so scattered. Can you tell? It's one of those days. All right. 2 things. Back to the climate change issue. Even Chuck Todd apparently this morning said something or tweeted out something to the effect that Hurricane Sandy is a direct result of climate change. Now, finally, maybe, perhaps, we will see some real discussion of this matter. And someone like Mitt Romney can't get away with shit like this.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans.
Ha ha ha! Yeah, that's so funny. Ha ha ha!
And to heal the planet.
Well, good, because it's about time somebody tries. And obviously Mitt Romney's not going to do it. In fact, Mitt Romney, when President Obama stopped campaigning for a few days, apparently he's going back on the campaign trail tomorrow. I'm kind of surprised about that, but he is. But at least he admitted and said, this is what I'm going to do. Mitt Romney, in true fashion, because he is bullshit Mitt. That's my new my new name for him. Bullshit Mitt is so full of it. This is all he knows how to do is lie. So he says, well, we're going to suspend campaigning too. And so what do? They just sort of rebrand the events that had already been planned in the same venues with the same guests, the same speakers, the same everything, and call them hurricane relief events. They took down some of the political signs, but what they didn't do is at least even change the press passes that call them victory rallies. Yeah. And I gotta say, I gotta give Andrea Mitchell credit. Yes, I do deride her sometimes and call her Mrs. Greenspan. But look, talking about these events, there's a great piece. I'm going to put it up on. It's from BuzzFeed. Let me see if I have it here. Here, it's called "The Making of Romney Storm Relief Event." A scramble to depoliticize a political campaign and $5,000 in supplies from Walmart. Just grab something was the quote. You see, they were so afraid that they weren't going to have enough supplies to, fill up this truck to take to the swing states. No, they're not going to New York. They're only going to places where, the vote is could possibly go to Romney. The problem is, supplies, canned foods, things like that, that's not what they want or need. In fact, Andrea Mitchell said this on her show yesterday.
How do they handle this? And then you've got the image of Mitt Romney doing what they say is not a campaign event in the same space they were going to hold a campaign event. They say they're making collections for hurricane and storm relief. Chrysalissa, first to you. We checked with the Red Cross. The Red Cross said, well, they're always grateful for donations, that this is not what they need or want.
It's
that
not.
They always tell people, please donate money, because we have our own packagers, wholesalers. They have their own distribution system. And to now get these canned goods from the Romney event in Ohio and have to first package it, used clothes, they have to clean, they can't go directly to victims. So what they need is donations of blood and donations of money. It does seem like a thinly veiled, why Ohio? Why choose Ohio for,
Okay, did you hear that? It's not what they need or want. This is going to make their job harder. They need money. They need blood. That's what they need. And Mitt Romney is just putting on a show. I got to say, I've been friends with John Ondrasik for years. John Ondrasik is a singer-songwriter. You might know him more as Five for Fighting. The song Superman and 100 Years. He's had a bunch of hits. And I was friendly with John before he hit it big. I was one of the early promoters of his music. He makes great music, I got to say. He's just very talented. But he is a Republican. And I got to say, I mean, I keep my distance from him right now because, he tweeted out something yesterday that he's going to be with Mitt Romney at a hurricane relief event today somewhere. And I just, it's not a hurricane relief event. It's a political rally. You know what? Quit fucking lying about it. Okay? Okay. I've had Stephen Goldstein, my friend Stephen Goldstein, on the show quite a bit. He's an op-ed columnist for the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, and he is the author of the new book, Atlas Drugged, Ayn Rand Be Damned. I put up a blog post last night on my blog at radioornot.com, excerpting the chapter from his book about, again, if you're not familiar with what the book is, it's a futuristic look at the dystopia that the U.S. would be in a Randian future. Okay, if Ayn Rand's vision were realized, everything, and I should say, Mitt Romney's vision were realized, everything would be privatized. So in this book, Atlas Drugged, Ayn Rand Be Damned, we see the United States of America is now the corporate states of America. And there are no more governmental agencies. They have all been privatized. And many of them, because they were privatized and you can't make money, being the National Hurricane Center, they go out of business. So in this very prophetic book and the chapter that I have posted on my blog this morning at radioornot.com, there's a scene, there's a chapter where there's a monster storm out in the Caribbean that slams into Florida. And because there is no National Hurricane Center anymore, nobody knows just how big and monstrous this storm is. So the storm hits Florida, and Florida is decimated. And of course, then the shock doctrine comes in. The private industries come in and corporatize and privatize and profitize the state. This is what Mitt Romney would have. In fact, again, in his own words, and this is all we need to do, is go back to his own words.
He wants to hire more government workers.
Whoops, that's not the one. Here, I can play it. I'll play it from here.
Governor Romney, you've been a chief executive of state. I was just in Joplin, Missouri. I've been in Mississippi and Louisiana and Tennessee and other communities dealing with whether it's the tornadoes, the flooding, and worse. FEMA's about to run out of money, and there are some people who say do it on a case-by-case basis, and some people who say, maybe we're learning a lesson here that the states should take on more of this role. How do you deal with something like that?
Absolutely. Every time you have an occasion to take something from the federal government and send it back to the states, that's the right direction. And if you can go even further and send it back to the private sector, that's even better. Instead of thinking in the federal budget, what we should cut, we should ask ourselves the opposite question. What should we keep? We should take all of what we're doing at the federal level and say, what are the things we're doing that we don't have to do? And those things we got to stop doing, because we're borrowing $1.6 trillion more this year than we're taking in.
Including disaster relief.
We cannot afford to do those things without jeopardizing the future for our kids. It is simply immoral, in my view, for us to continue to rack up larger and larger debts and pass them on to our kids, knowing full well that we'll all be dead and gone before it's paid off. Makes no sense at all.
No, what makes no sense and is simply immoral, Mr. Romney, is the idea of standing by and not doing everything possible to help American citizens who are devastated by a natural with the aid of man-made destruction disaster. That's what's immoral. And that's what he would have us do. And so, I urge you, if you can, go to my website, go to radioornot.com, read that chapter of Atlas Drugged, Ayn Rand Be Damned, this very prescient, prophetic chapter in this book in a Randian future in which, yes, the National Hurricane Center had been privatized. And so people weren't warned in advance of this monster storm that was coming. And then Mitt Romney and his ilk are able to, take advantage of the shock doctrine and privatize, the state of Florida, much as the corporatists did with New Orleans following Katrina. There is a precedent there. In fact, right now, what we need to do is listen to the lessons that we should have learned. In fact, my friend Russ Baker of whowhatwhy.com reposted an article on his website that was originally published in June of 2006 entitled Lessons from Another Hurricane. I believe Russ Baker is with us. Are you there, Russ?
Yeah, I am. Hello.
Hi. I'm stunned by number one, the callousness of Mitt Romney's response to the disaster that has hit, a good portion of this nation. Excuse me. And the lies. I mean, the fact is he's just rebranded these campaign events as hurricane relief events and, doing things that, ostensibly taking donations for the Red Cross of the kind that the Red Cross doesn't want or need. I mean, it's stunning. And the fact that, I played this audio earlier from the RNC. Let me play it again. This is Mitt Romney, his big, nomination acceptance speech at the Republican convention.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans.
Oh, funny. And what else, Mitt?
And to heal the planet.
Yeah, good. That's exactly what we need right now, isn't it, Russ?
Well, what actually strikes me about that, it sounds like he's mocking kind of almost like quasi-religious beliefs. And for a man like Romney, who has been given such a free pass on holding views that are certainly widely considered to be somewhat eccentric, religious views, to mock those kind of quasi-religious sounding pronouncements about a larger thing strikes me as very odd in itself.
Well, yes, you're right. And not only did he mock them then, obviously, a couple of months ago, he didn't know that we were going to be hit by this massive superstorm, right? That was going to claim 50 lives so far and counting. But apparently yesterday during his campaign event, hurricane relief rally, he was asked numerous questions by the media about what are your plans for FEMA? I mean, question after question after question, and Mitt Romney did what Mitt Romney does and pretended that he didn't hear the questions. Seriously? Can he get away with this?
Well, they're in a very odd position because after years and years and years of saying that the government is incompetent, the government is inherently evil, the government should not be doing things when private citizens can do things. In this particular case, and as you know, I live in New York City. I just by chance happened to not be there when the hurricane hit, but in close touch with people who are, and certainly the rather masterful job that was done on all levels of government. I mean, the things that struck me, for example, they were able to get all the buses, practically out of the city to safe haven. Now, for example, that's why with the subways flooded, they were able to start putting buses back into service. I mean, all these things went relatively without a hitch, and that's because government, meaning the thing that we pay for, prepared for this thing. And as you mentioned, Nicole, on our website, whowhatwhy.com, we did put up that long investigation that we did some years ago into the Bush administration and its abdication along the lines of what you're talking about, FEMA, its decision to basically destroy FEMA. And that story, by the way, has never really been done by the media. The real story behind George Bush putting in this Michael Brown character and what they did in their efforts to basically destroy FEMA as a means of sort of destroying government and creating opportunities to outsource and to make money off of all this stuff and to have their friends make money. That, I think, in a sense, is that Romney is very much on board with that philosophy.
I agree with you 100%. Again, we're speaking with Russ Baker. He is the man behind whowhatwhy.com. Just a couple of quick asides here along the lines of what you were just talking about. Michael Brown, Mr. Heck of a Job, Brownie, who so blew the response to Katrina, and was also so grossly unqualified for the job of heading up FEMA. What did he import? Arabian dancing horses or something? That was his job before. He had no qualifications other than being a crony of W's. Yesterday, Michael Brown, his response to, on one hand, you've got New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, not exactly a shrinking violet when it comes to criticizing the president, right? This is a partisan Republican blowhard who has done nothing but praise President Obama and his both pre-storm preparations and post-storm response. He's had nothing but good things to say about Obama. Michael Brown said that President Obama acted too soon to call attention to federal disaster response efforts to Hurricane Sandy. He said, in the context of the election, I simply said he should have waited. The storm was still forming. People were debating whether it was going to be as bad as expected or not. And I noted that the president should have let the governors and mayors deal with the storm until it got closer to hitting the coastal areas along the Washington, D.C., New York City corridor. No. I mean, Obama was too cautious. Excuse me?
Well, what's interesting about that, in as far as Hurricane Katrina went, those states that were hit by it were physically larger, and yet the coordination between them was crucial. In the case of the eastern seaboard, if you look at the map, I mean, it reminds a bit of Europe. I mean, these are tiny, downstate New York,
right?
Connecticut, Delaware. I mean, these are tiny places. Even New Jersey, which is one of the bigger states there, are not very big, and they share all these things in common: massive commutes, tunnels, bridges, all of these things. And so you have to have not only coordination between multiple governors, but that's not enough. You've got to have a federal presence, and particularly, of course, in the airports and so forth. I mean, it's just ludicrous to think that you can ever accomplish large-scale things in a country unless the country is involved.
But you're exactly right. And that's why, I'm sorry. Look, I've often been a detractor of President Obama. There are a lot of things I criticize him for his handling of many things. This one, he's doing absolutely 100% right. Now, regarding what I mentioned before about Mitt Romney ignoring questions from the Washington Post yesterday, Mitt Romney, Kettering, Ohio, the site of his what was a planned, election rally that turned into a hurricane relief event. Mitt Romney repeatedly ignored questions about his position on federal funding for FEMA at an event for storm victims Tuesday. After speaking briefly to supporters and gathering donations, I might add the kind of donations that the Red Cross does not want or need, Senator Rob Portman and some campaign staffers headed outside into the cold, rainy afternoon and proceeded to load up a yellow Penske truck with supplies, canned goods, and other donated items. Governor, are you going to see some storm damage? One reporter asked. Several others again asked Romney whether he would eliminate FEMA. Governor, you've been asked 14 times. Why are you refusing to answer the question? One asked. Romney ignored the reporter's queries and continued loading up the truck. Earlier during the event, he ignored similar queries. I mean, come on.
Well, you know something, that article we were talking about what really happened with Hurricane Katrina and the Bush administration and Brownie, who you mentioned, who, by the way, didn't even import those horses. He was hired by a horse association to judge disputes over the horses. And what's very interesting, and we go into that article on Who, What, Why, is the backstory, the cynicism of the Bush administration and their backers in wanting to destroy FEMA, bringing in not first Michael Brown, but a guy named Joe Albaugh, who was a crony of Bush's. And Joe Albaugh is the one who brought Brown in just because, as we point out in the article, he wanted somebody he could trust in shall we say, questionable financial dealings. He wanted a guy who had been his underling back in Oklahoma. That's why Brown was brought in. That story was never reported before. Brown was even less qualified than Albaugh, who at least had been Bush's chief of staff in Texas. But the interesting thing about Albaugh in the Romney context is if you go online and you type in Joe Albaugh, A-L-L-B-A-U-G-H, and Romney, you'll see he was out there early this year pushing Republicans to back Romney when there was still a fight going on, and he was saying, Romney's a good man, and he's really the most competent, and we need to get behind him. I just think that's an interesting endorsement, and that ought to come out in this time frame, that the man who chose Michael Brown to oversee FEMA thinks that Romney is a competent administrator and urges that we back him.
In fact, from that piece that you're talking about, Russ Baker, here's a paragraph. But why Michael Brown? Why, out of all the people Albaugh had met over 3 decades as a GOP operative, did he place so much confidence in a failed lawyer whose last job was a troubled tenure with an obscure association of show horse owners? When pressed, the taciturn Albaugh tersely replied that Brown was a lifelong friend in whom he had confidence. To this moment, that has remained the official, indeed only explanation of how and why Michael Brown was running FEMA when Hurricane Katrina struck. That is stunning.
Well, you know something, Nicole? You see, that kind of thing is why I started Who, What, Why, and you've been a great supporter and promoter of our site, which is nonprofit, and we appreciate it. You know, over the years in journalism, as I worked for all kinds of news organizations, mainstream and alternative alike, I was constantly frustrated that we would never get the real story. There was so much interest in rhetoric or superficiality that there just was no demand for these kinds of serious investigative digs. That's why I started this. And you know, the problem is that the public gets lied to again and again or treated like idiots when we want and have a right to know, why, what's happening with FEMA. The story that Bill Clinton hired one of the smartest, most competent emergency guys in the country, universally lauded by Democrats and Republicans alike, did a fabulous job at FEMA, and then Bush brought in this clown, and why he brought the clown, the why story. That's like we call our site Who, What, Why. These stories don't get told, and so we can't fix this country. And I hope I could just make a short plug. We're launching our first ever fundraising campaign for Who, What, Why, which is a nonprofit. It's on Kickstarter. Are you familiar with that site?
Of course, Kickstarter.com, which funds and projects really that are either arts or media related. Yes,
that's right, and it's a great platform where people who don't have big commercial backing can go directly to members of the public and say, here's who we are, here's what we're doing, we're making a film or an album or a product or whatever it is. And in our case, we're saying we're trying to get the truth out, and so we've created this Kickstarter campaign. If you go to our website, whowhatwhy.com, and I think it's the second posting down, you just click there, it'll take you to our Kickstarter site. We had a cool little video, and we're trying to raise really a fairly modest sum of money in the next few weeks, and we would love it if some of your listeners would go over there and join. We got actually terrific rewards that you get at different donation levels. It's anything to why is tax deductible. And our aim is to do more of that story that you're talking about right now on Who, What, Why, the real story on FEMA. You know, do we need FEMA, or is it okay to get rid of these things and leave it to Mitt Romney to collect cans that aren't wanted? I mean, that kind of story has to be done, and we feel that if we get the public support, we can put into place crack reporters to really go after the red meat on these things.
Right, and I'll put links, obviously, on my blog as well at radioornot.com to Who, What, Why, and to your Kickstarter. It's the Kickstarter, the Post-Election Project. And, you know, what's interesting, Brad Friedman is a good friend of mine and a frequent guest on the show. And he was on last week, and I said something like, we've got just over a week left. And, and he's like, no, that's when it all begins. I mean, because, look, no matter what happens, we're already hearing, horror stories of what's going to happen if Obama wins the electoral vote, but Romney wins the popular vote, which I don't think is going to happen, but just say it does. Now, look, we dealt with that in 2000 and had to suck it up and live with George W. Bush, who was not only didn't win the election, he was appointed by the Supreme Court. But I think if it's reversed, if Obama wins the electoral vote and Romney wins the popular vote, we're going to see fireworks like we've never seen before. It's going to be another, disaster on a magnitude that's, I don't know, that's going to be crazy.
Well,
but
two points in that area, Nicole.
Yeah.
One is that as far as after the election, yes, that's why we call it the post-election project, because there's so much attention when it's an entertainment. I mean, it is. Let's face it, it's a horse race. It's close.
It's a reality show.
Not only do all of us pay a lot more attention to government during the campaign, but so does the media. And what we want to do, and this is what we're looking for the funding for, we want to put people on the ground in Washington, on Wall Street, and so on, and really go after what happens when the deal-making gets done, whether it's Obama or Romney. The pressure is intense for people's share of the spoils. And there's very, very little looking at the private meetings that take place and the pressure on who gets appointed and what policy put through. So that's one thing that's very important. Another thing is what we try to do at Who, What, Why is to talk about what you just said, these structural issues like the popular vote. We ran an article, you may have seen, it's recently still on our front page, about the lack of meaningful choices. And you've been a leader, Nicole, on your show, in talking about the where there are substantive differences, but also the lack of substantive differences between the two nominees. And we raise that issue, and we talk about alternatives. How can we change the electoral college process to make it more democratic? What about a national popular vote? What about giving third parties a piece of the action so we can have more of a diversity of views? So this is all the kind of stuff we need to be talking about after the election, instead of saying, okay, it's over, we can alternate as something else. And by the way, our Kickstarter campaign, if I can say one more thing about it, we have an anonymous donor who has just pledged to match all the donations that we get for the next several days only. And so if anybody is thinking about backing what we're talking about, you're going to double your money if you get on there today and get involved. So we would be enormously appreciative, of course.
Great. One of the things here, and I appreciate the kind words you said about supporting whowhatwhy.com. Well, the reason I do it is because we have seen the destruction of the profession of journalism over the last couple of decades. Seriously. When you got something like Fox, the fake news channel, calling itself news, and there's nothing we can do about it because it's cable and it's not regulated by the FCC, and you've got a huge portion of the population watching that shit and thinking it is news rather than just made up stories to promote a political agenda, that's frightening. What we need is real journalism, and that's what you do at whowhatwhy.com. And so I'm always happy to support what you do in any way I can. So.
And there's one other story in particular I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you saw that on the site, but it's about a a video that has been seen by millions of people. I don't hear it discussed in the media at all. We did an investigative dig into it. It's clearly intended to benefit Romney. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but yeah, the article, the piece at Who What Why is the viral video that could wound Obama and the hidden agenda behind it. And this is something, it's like an 18-minute long video that, of course, was pushed by Glenn Beck's website, The Blaze. And, talk about something that is so not journalistic, that is just made up nonsense. That's what it is. But, it's Glenn Beck and he's got a following. And this video was put together to discredit Obama.
Well, it's even more sinister than that because the video, which targets basically Jewish swing voters and other people who are concerned about the state of Israel and its security, we investigated and we found out that the guy funding the entire thing has no connections at all to that issue. No, as far as we can tell, no interest in it. And he's got his own personal beef with Obama and with Congress and with government regulation because of the problems that his pharmaceutical company got into, and it's all hidden. It was only when we did that investigative reporting that we discovered that they were trying to manipulate an unrelated issue as a way to tip the election. And, this is the kind of thing that this country has turned into, that these kind of manipulations are so constant, and if we're not vigilant watchdogs, we're in for some very, very big problems ahead because this is only going to get worse.
You're so right. I will put a link up to this and the video, absolutely uncertain. Honestly, Russ, I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I told the story the other day, but I'll tell you, I was at a softball game for my kid. And this was just Monday night. So 2 nights ago. And I was talking to one of the other parents, a woman that I've spoken with before, a very nice woman, African-American. Somehow we got on the subject of the election, although in those kind of settings, I try to steer clear of politics. After all, that's, what I do for a living. And, I don't like to engage people outside. I don't. Anyway, we got onto the subject of the election. I forget how we got there. And somehow she said, and again, an African-American woman, and she's like, I don't like Obama. I've never liked him. I don't trust him. We talked about the fact that we both voted for John Edwards in the primary, go figure. But I said, look, there's no question. I'm critical of Obama on a lot of things, but when you place him next to Romney, there's no choice. I mean, as at least we can push Obama from the left. With Romney on so many fronts, it's game over. We're screwed. And she's like, yeah, but it's just something about him that really bothers me. She said, I was watching this video and there was, they had a man, and he had a bag over his head and he was describing himself and you had to guess who it was. And I'm thinking, all right, well, this sounds like Obama. This sounds like Obama. And she's going on and on. Well, he had raised by a single mom spent part of his childhood in a foreign land. And she's going on. She goes, and then he took off the hood and it was Hitler. And I just thought, oh, my God, you've been brainwashed. What the hell are, that's when I just walked away from her. But this is the kind of shit that, people are being fed and they're believing this nonsense. And this is what's forming their decision on who to vote for.
Well, it's enormously dangerous. And the kind of rhetoric that we're seeing and the lack of restraint by people seeking basically selfish gains has become very, very dangerous. We've had a history in this country of that kind of thing, but of course with multimedia and viral videos, it's gotten that much worse. We'll run something on Who What Why this weekend about how this kind of thing can really turn ugly and what's happening in Greece. Very, very interesting, where corporate interests start turning to thugs and hooligans to suppress the legitimate demands of workers, to target the public against immigrants and so forth. So we've got to be very, very careful in this country, and we need strong voices for reason and for decency. And that, I think, is really the larger issue that needs to be discussed now and especially after the election.
You're so right. Russ Baker, find him at whowhatwhy.com. I'll have links to all this stuff and the Kickstarter campaign on my blog at radioornot.com after the show. Thanks for the great work you do.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
Take care. Bye-bye. Russ Baker. Yeah, and that's one of those sites that you should most certainly bookmark because they do great, great work. whowhatwhy.com. All right, you know what time it is? Oh, I got to turn this up. Come on, everyone sing while I get Amy Simon on the line, because it's time for some fabulous female facts.
I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend.
Yeah, we started a new segment with Amy Simon of She'sHistory.com. Okay, enough, Helen. Every Wednesday morning, we get some fabulous female facts from Amy Simon, the founder, writer, performer of She's History, the most dangerous women in America then and now. You can find her at She'sHistory.com. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nicole.
How you doing today?
Okay, you know, like everyone else, I'm very worried and full of good hope for recovery on the East Coast.
How's your family?
All my family's from there.
How is your family? How did they make it through the storm?
They're okay. Everyone in my family has no power, but they're all okay. They're not suffering like the terrible story you opened the show with. My heart goes out to them. Jessie, the girl you were talking about.
Yes, I know. And the fact that I had Greg on the show yesterday because, you know, he lives in Brooklyn. And he was on the show just last week, and throughout the night on Monday night, I was keeping up to date on, you know, I was Allison at a softball game, so I wasn't in front of the TV, and I had my phone out. I'm watching Greg's Twitter feed, but he went out to Long Island to be with his family, but was so plugged into everything and was tweeting and emailing updates all night. And I thought, you know what? Let me ask Greg. I know he made it through the storm okay, although he had, in the morning on Tuesday, told us yesterday of 4 friends who lost their homes, 2 in Rockaway Beach, 1 in Jersey. Yeah. I mean, and I thought, okay, he's got a great vantage point. And so he was on, and then an hour later, I get this email from him about a friend who was killed. I mean, it's stunning.
It is, and it's just so random. It's so random.
So random.
You know, just really makes you think. So.
It's horrible.
Anyway, I wanted to talk about a couple of, cheer everyone up a little bit with a few fabulous female facts here.
Okay.
And I just decided to do a quick little bit of research on the Red Cross because I'm always so inspired by the women that I write about and teach about in She's History that make the world better. And just a quick little note about the Red Cross, which was started in 1881 by Clara Barton.
Nice.
And, you know, one of the reasons that I started doing She's History, I always say this, is because when my daughter was 10 years old and she came home from school and said she wanted to do her women's history report on Cher or Janet Jackson, which is funny, but not.
No, you know, but let me interrupt right there, because Cher has shown herself to be, if you followed Cher on Twitter, she's very proactive, politically
I know.
active.
That's another thing.
And
I always make a point when I mean, I like to tell true stories, and that is true. That is one of the reasons I started doing this. And I say to my daughter, and I say in the show, Cher is awesome. She's extremely philanthropic. Yep. She's one of those quiet, philanthropists.
Now, Cher would be not a bad choice, although back then, maybe not so much.
The point that I'm trying to make when I talk about this is that Cher is a very cool, accomplished, wonderful woman, but she doesn't belong on a women's history poster.
Right. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Clara Barton.
Yep.
So, but I don't mean to put down Cher. And I remember at the time also I used to talk about Lady Gaga, who actually has turned into a wonderful role model.
Yes, she has.
So the point I'm making is about role models, but the reason I'm bringing this up with Clara Barton, and keep in mind, I do want to talk about the women who ran for president, so I hope I can get there.
All right, let's go.
But one of the reasons I started She's History was because I was tired of just the same 5 women being held up to be admired for Women's History Month, and Clara Barton was one, and Florence Nightingale was another, and we always would hear about Eleanor Roosevelt and Amelia Earhart, and we did hear about Susan B. Anthony, but those were pretty much the same women. So I just wanted to mention that one of the major reasons I do She's History is to talk about the women that deserve to be known and are not known. But Clara Barton, not Dolly Parton, Clara Barton, she was the founder of the Red Cross. And that was in 1881, and I'm always impressed by women. Even in the Civil War, it was actually Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first female doctor in America, that got the Sanitary Commission going, which was sort of a precursor to a Red Cross. And she's the one that organized the women to go into the field and take care of soldiers. So I'm just always just beyond impressed and inspired by women's compassion and courage and energy and desire to make the world better. So as we're, battling right now the effects of the hurricane, back in, I guess it was 1900s, the Red Cross, under Clara Barton, they provided 1.5 million strawberry plants to destitute farmers so they could support themselves. So that was just like one little teeny tiny thing that they did. So there's just all these beautiful acts of kindness being done that we don't know about. So there's my little Hurricane Red Cross. But I wanted to talk about the election. Obviously, we're a week away.
Yes, we are.
And, I can go off for a while. And, again, I say the reason I started working on She's History because I'm raising daughters and I wanted them to have good role models.
Mm-hmm.
And when my daughter came home and said she wants to do her women's history report on Cher,
Right.
Well, that was my older daughter, Rose, and she got away with it. She actually ended up doing it on Janet Jackson. But my younger daughter, 4 years later, when she came home, she did her women's history report, thanks to me, on Victoria Woodhull, who was the first woman to run for president. And you know how obsessed I am with Victoria Woodhull.
Yep.
But, it was 4 or 5 years ago that I discovered her based on the fact that I was raising girls and that Hillary was running against Barack, and I had literally accidentally discovered Victoria Woodhull in the library. But just to remind everybody, in case they haven't heard me rant about her before, she was the most fabulous female ever. She was born in 1830. And she was born extremely poor to crazy, I always say crazy Mel Gibson family. And she was born in Ohio, which was the home of so many fabulous females, not just Victoria Woodhull, but also Frances Wright, the first woman to speak in public. Gloria Steinem is from Ohio. The first college that was open to women, Oberlin, was in Ohio. It just spawns fantastic females.
Right.
But she was born to this really poor family, and they used to stage these traveling medicine shows, and they would travel around the country doing seances, and she would read people and do healing and do all kinds of stuff. But she actually left her family to escape at the age of 15, and she ended up marrying an abusive alcoholic doctor. And she was a child laborer. I mean, she had 3 years of formal education, so she wanted to get away. There were lots of hints that her father was, abusive to her. And she tried to escape, and she ended up marrying this abusive alcoholic doctor who was sitting in a bar when she gave birth at the age of 16 to her first child, Byron. And I've read all her bios and all, as much as I can read about her, and it's just a terrible image of a 16-year-old girl by herself in an apartment giving birth, and she had to get a neighbor to come and help her. I mean, she had no one, so she just really learned how to get through tough times. And to think she ended up running for president.
Mm-hmm.
She was called the prostitute who ran for president. She was called Mrs. Satan. She was called the bewitching broker, the queen of finance, and the Joan of Arc of the women's movement. And she was very divisive in the women's movement because as she ended up surrounding herself with very smart men who she learned from, and she used what she had to get where she was, which I always find, that's what we do. But in those days, she didn't have anything open to her. She wasn't educated, so she couldn't be a teacher. And, in our early history, the only fields open to women really that had any education were to be in education. But she didn't have that, so she ended up seamstress, and I think I told the story. She went up to San Francisco with her husband. It was, during the gold rush, and she was making like $3 a week as a seamstress, and this actress comes in to get her dress sewn and sees this gorgeous girl, because Victoria Woodhull was stunningly beautiful and tall and very majestic, and just talked her into becoming a stage actress, and she went from $3 a week to $50 a week. But back in those days, in the mid-1800s, if you were a stage actress, you did a little bit more than act, which is how she got her name, the prostitute who ran for president.
Right.
But anyway, she ends up leaving her husband, remarrying. She's traveling around the country with her new husband, who they really aren't even sure she married him. His name was Woodhull, but his name was Blood, Captain Blood, but she kept the name Woodhull, which was her first husband. And she and her crazy father and family hatch a plan that they're going to go find Cornelius Vanderbilt, who at the time was the richest man in the country, and he was the railroad baron, but he loved his mother, and his mother had passed away, and everyone knew that he was always hiring people to talk to his mother. He used to carry like a picture of his mother in his breast pocket of his coat. So Victoria and her family, they planned to get a hold of him because Victoria would talk to the dead. That's what they did. They were a traveling medicine show, and they did seances, and they planned this whole thing. She had a sister, Tennessee, who was as beautiful as Victoria, a very sexy girl. the two of them show up at Vanderbilt's house down in New York City, which is probably the place that's underwater right now. But they show up, and they didn't have any money, but they show up in their finest dresses in a carriage because they knew that he would answer the door. He would answer the door to anyone. He'd slam the door in people's faces, but he was very open, and he would open his door. So these beautiful women show up. They knock on his door. They tell him they want to help him talk to his mother, and the next thing you know, they're in. And Victoria becomes Vanderbilt's financial advisor. And her sister, Tennessee, becomes his mistress. So the two of them are right there in his life. And they ended up opening the first female stock brokerage firm on Wall Street, thanks to Vanderbilt. I mean, there's a lot more juicy stuff to this story, how she, would get her financial tips from the prostitutes that she was friends with that were visited by the Wall Street brokers that would discuss things in front of them. They would tell it to Victoria, and Victoria would pretend she's hearing it from the heavens and tell Vanderbilt, and he believes her. I mean, it's really an amazing story. And on, I think it was September 24th, 1869, Black Friday, that's the day Victoria Woodhull made $700,000 on the stock market. And she used all that money to help women. That's all she wanted to do. But back in those days, there was something called the Comstock Law, which was you weren't allowed to mail obscene materials. And she opened her own newspaper called the Woodhull Claflin Weekly, and she would report all kinds of things, rapes. She was arrested so many times, and when she ran for president in 1872, she ran against Ulysses S. Grant. She was arrested, and she was in jail on Election Day, mostly because there was a very famous preacher. His name was Henry Ward Beecher, and he was a serial adulterer, and he had an affair with a woman named Elizabeth Tilton. Now, her husband was a big suffrage supporter. He actually was having an affair with Victoria Woodhull. But Elizabeth Tilton got pregnant by Beecher, and she was outcast from it. She was, she really suffered from it. And Beecher, nobody ever held him accountable. So Victoria Woodhull prints this story in her newspaper. This was like the biggest scandal of the century. It was like the O.J. Simpson thing back then. It was gigantic. She published the story about this scandal, and what happens? Nothing to Beecher. She gets arrested. She and her sister are thrown into jail, and they get arrested for libel and obscenity. And she ended up, being acquitted, but she lost all her money. But she was very controversial. She forgave her first husband, who turned out to be sort of an opium addict. And when he came to her, when she was rich and doing well in New York, he shows up at her door. She's already married. She lets him come in. So she's now known, very scandalous, because she had so much compassion. I mean, I don't know if I could have done that. But she was so compassionate, and she couldn't stand the hypocrisy. So she would stand up, and she started the Equal Rights Party, which the second woman to run for president, Belva Lockwood, ran on. But Victoria started that party, and she would make these speeches, and her platform literally was free love. She would say, I am a free lover. I have the inalienable, constitutional, and natural right to love whom I may. I mean, she just had brass ones, But she was so controversial that she actually caused a rift in the women's movement because she stood up and said what she thought, and she was just too controversial. So that nobody even knows who she is because she was written pretty much out of the books, right?
Yes, and that's the thing. We've talked about this before. That's one of the things I love so much about She's History is that Victoria Woodhull, first woman to run for president, seriously, and we don't know her name, and we do not know her except for I learned about her from you.
Yeah, and there was something that I read about her that really just resonated so much with me because when I first started to work on She's History, and I talk about this as well, I was inspired by being a mom and the women, but it was when I got divorced, and I could not believe what the family legal system was like. It was so just terrible, and I was very naive. So when I was learning about Victoria, who suffered nothing, I've gone through nothing in my life compared to what she has. But when she was a young, she just had her son Byron, and she was young and realized what she had taken on. This is a beautiful, just heartbreaking quote of hers that I want to leave you with because we're getting there, right?
Okay. Yep, we are.
Rude contacts with facts chased my visions and dreams quickly away, and in their stead I beheld the horrors, the corruption, the evils, and hypocrisy of society. And as I stood among them, a young wife, a great wall of agony went out from my soul. And I just want to say that it's so unfortunate that it's pain and agony that creates a change. You know, if she didn't suffer like that, she wouldn't have and she rallied for the women to the vote based on the 14th Amendment, and we can talk, another 3 hours about how she actually really helped the women's movement, opened the first female stock brokerage firm, and really brought women's issues to the forefront in the 1870s, and inspired so many fabulous females. So,
yep. There you go.
Story about the first woman who ran for president, Victoria Woodhull, 1872.
And we are still waiting for a first female president. Amy Simon, she'shistory.com is where you find her. Thank you, Amy. Now go vote.
Oh, you got it.
Okay. Bye, sweetie.
Bye.
All right. And speaking of fabulous females and the new, well, I don't know. We'll see.
I read the news today.
But it is time to check in with the Talk Radio News Service at talkradionews.com. Good morning. Who's on the line today?
Good morning. It's Benny Martinez from Washington. How are you, Nicole?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you doing, Benny?
Doing well. Just taking in the after effects of Hurricane Sandy sweeping in. We're back in the office today, back functioning, and it seems as though everyone's in recovery mode right now.
Right. Not only are you guys back in the office of Talk Radio News, but the federal government is back at work today as well, yes?
Right. The offices are open, back at work. I guess that's a matter of semantics.
Right. Well, Congress is out, but yes.
Exactly. And then the president actually is scheduled today to head to Atlantic City to survey some of the damage in New Jersey alongside Republican Governor Chris Christie.
That's right.
Who it's interesting to some people. It's an interesting tandem to see the president and Christie together. But at a time like this, I think it's necessary for people to see legislators coming together and working together to try to solve things. Meanwhile, though, interesting enough, Mayor Bloomberg from New York has said that he doesn't want the president to go by and visit and see some of the devastating impact Hurricane Sandy left in New York. He's saying, though, that it's not a snub, it's not a jab at any rate. He just thinks that they have the issue under control there. So I don't know. Some people might think differently about that.
Yeah. By the way, you also didn't mention that earlier, and I don't know if he's still there, but President Obama made a sort of a surprise trip to the FEMA headquarters. And to show that he's serious, look, the reporters, the media was not allowed in there. They released a couple of still photos of President Obama at the table with the FEMA, director and other people working on disaster relief. But this is not a political move. This is the president doing his job.
Absolutely. And I think, regardless of what the truth is, I think with the media, you're going to always hear some kind of spin, political or otherwise. And you heard Chris Christie say at one point when he was asked about presidential politics and how this impacts that, he said, I don't give a damn about presidential politics at this current time. So, that kind of question is obviously something that he wasn't going to take at that point in time.
Good. Okay. So now, one of the many infuriating things about Romney to me is that the bullshitter aspect of his entire campaign. This man wouldn't know the truth if it came up and bit him on the ass, or I should say, wouldn't know how to tell the truth if his life depended on it. They made a big deal of the fact that much like John McCain suspended his campaign to go to D.C. and fix the financial meltdown 4 years ago. Mitt Romney made a big show of, we're going to stop campaigning for, while we deal with the storm. And meanwhile, they didn't cancel anything. They just rebranded the name of his event from a victory rally to a hurricane relief rally. They didn't even bother to change the badges for the press that still say victory rally on it. They set up a photo op where they went to a Walmart and spent about $5,000 to just grab anything was the mantra. Because they were afraid people would come to this rally without stuff. And so they had stuff to fill a truck. And by the way, we've then learned this is so not what the Red Cross wants or needs. What they want and need are donations of blood and money. That's it. And yet now they're going to be saddled with this stuff from Romney that they have no use for.
Yeah, and to add to that, just one day after the hurricane passes by and deals a devastating blow, Romney back Both candidates are technically back on the presidential trail.
Yeah.
Romney in Florida holding a trio of events with Senator Marco Rubio and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. So he's back at it. Obviously didn't miss a step, after the hurricane rolled through.
Yep. And now we do hear that the President Obama, is going to go back on the trail tomorrow.
Yeah, it's right back at it, and it's unfortunate the timing of this thing. I mean, imagine if this storm would have hit 1 week later, how big of a deal that would have been to impact some voters, specifically in Ohio. Ohio was pretty devastatingly hit. I guess the fact that it could have impacted the election worse than what it perhaps potentially did.
Well,
is always interesting to think about.
Right now, there's a question, excuse me, as to what is going to happen in places like New York, where the subways. I'm sorry, I even in a best case scenario, I can't imagine the subways up and running. Right now they have some bus service. I think buses are running on weekend schedules. That's not enough. And they don't have early voting in New York. So how are people going to get out and vote?
It's an interesting task, and I can imagine for people who are absolutely, hell-bent on voting, they'll find a way to do it. But for some people who just aren't as enthusiastic as others, they might just skip it altogether, which is never a good thing for democracy.
Right, and I'm sure. Look, turnout in New York will likely be at historic lows, not because of lack of interest, but because people are literally digging out of the worst storm in New York City's history.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. I've seen some of the pictures and some of the footage from out there, and D.C., the area where I live, saw some high winds, but not nearly as bad of flooding as they saw in New York. It's a tough time for people.
Yeah, no, it really is. And just seeing the pictures, I just tweeted. Somebody had The Atlantic has a pictorial of some of the most unbelievable photos. I look, having lived in New York for many, many, many years, I'm just shocked. I'm so saddened by the pictures I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Perhaps to end this segment on a perhaps cheekier note.
Okay.
President Obama's senior campaign advisor, David Axelrod, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but he's promised that his signature mustache will be shaven off if Obama manages to lose Minnesota, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. All three states obviously leaning Democratic, but some people on Romney's campaign are saying that if it's up for grabs at this point, and David Axelrod just doing some posturing and saying that he'll shave his mustache if the campaign loses either of those states.
Yep.
There's something for you guys to picture in your mind, David Axelrod without a mustache.
Yeah, I actually heard that segment. I flip back and forth between Morning Joke and CNN in the car. I've got the XM, so and I heard that segment as I was taking my daughter to school this morning. And David Axelrod said he has had that mustache for 40 years. Yeah,
that takes some dedication. I don't know if I could have anything for 40 years.
Yeah, no, nor me. But I think what it's what it's indicative of is that he's got a lot of confidence. And the states were Minnesota. What were they? Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and what?
And Michigan.
And Michigan. And then, of course, Joe Scarborough had to insert himself in there. And he said if Romney wins either Florida or what other state, that he would grow a mustache.
Oh, that's right. I don't know if Joe Scarborough can pull off the mustache as well as Axelrod does. But
yeah, there you go.
We'll see.
All right. Benny Martinez from the Talk Radio News Service at talkradionews.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicole.
Bye-bye. All right. Still to come, we'll check in with John Amato of Crooks and Liars. One of the other side effects of Sandy is that a lot of really good websites are down. I have not been able to access Crooks and Liars all morning. I don't know where their servers are, but obviously their servers have been affected. So we'll get the latest on the status of Crooks and Liars and the stories they're covering. Yep, I can't connect. This sucks. From John Amato in a little bit. But we got a lot of stuff to do before we get to John. More stories that I haven't been able to get to yet. Before we do any of that, if ever there's a day for the Green News Report, it's today. So let's check in with Brad and Desi.
The Hudson River was pouring into the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel like a river.
Hurricane Sandy special report, the storm, the aftermath, and the impacts of climate change.
Sadly, we are getting more experience with these kinds of big impact storms.
Anyone who says there's not a dramatic change in weather patterns, I think is denying reality.
Plus, a reminder of one presidential candidate's position on federal disaster relief.
Every time you have an occasion to take something from the federal government and send it back to the states, that's the right direction. And if you can go even further and send it back to the private sector, that's even better.
Oi. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and even snarky comment.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans.
Oh, that joke at the RNC gets funnier all the time. Am I right? New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Des, Mitt Romney has been joking about the rise of the oceans all campaign season long. I will point out, however, that over the past 100 years, New York Harbor has risen 1.5 feet. And while folks, also like joking about what Al Gore warned in his movie, Inconvenient Truth, he did speak to exactly what we're seeing right now, the flooding of downtown Manhattan.
Oh, indeed. NASA scientists predicted this exact scenario 6 years ago. But we'll have more on that in a moment. But first, should note the danger is not over yet. Sandy remains a powerful storm system as it spins off into the northeast with impacts as far as the Great Lakes. So please stay safe out there. And remember, you can donate to the Red Cross relief efforts by texting the word Red Cross to the number 90999. A $10 donation will appear on your phone bill. Now, by the numbers, Hurricane Sandy made landfall near Atlantic City, New Jersey at 8 p.m. on Monday as a Category 1 hurricane. Sandy is officially the largest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin by sheer size. While a large late October hurricane is not unusual, the merging of 3 different weather systems, 2 Arctics and 1 tropical, is unusual. A hybrid snowstorm, nor'easter, and hurricane, or a snor'eastercane. As of airtime, 38 people are confirmed dead in 8 states, mostly from falling trees. That's on top of the 67 people killed in the Caribbean, most of those in earthquake-ravaged Haiti. Sandy broke multiple records, including unprecedented coastal flooding in New Jersey and New York that obliterated previous historical records. Latest estimates of economic losses range well above $20 billion, and that is not including the cost to repair infrastructure.
It would be nice if we could spend billions to do something about global warming, but we're apparently too busy spending hundreds of billions trying to fix the damage that it's already creating.
Indeed, over 8 million people are now without power across 16 states. That's especially dangerous in areas that have also been hit by heavy snow. Now, the good news is it looks like lessons were learned from Katrina. New Jersey's Republican Governor Chris Christie praised the coordinated federal, state, and local emergency response, FEMA, and President Obama on MSNBC Tuesday morning.
The president has been all over this, and he deserves great credit. He gave me his number at the White House, told me to call him if I needed anything, and he absolutely means it. And he and his administration have been coordinating with us great. It's been wonderful.
And as you noted, emergency response is very expensive. Now, in sharp contrast, Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, during the GOP primaries last year, said FEMA should be eliminated and FEMA's authority and funding should go instead to the states and private industry.
Every time you have an occasion to take something from the federal government and send it back to the states, that's the right direction. And if you can go even further and send it back to the private sector, that's even better.
For-profit disaster relief. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for those who can afford it.
Right.
Officials are now turning to focus on cleanup, recovery, and restoration of electricity and transportation. Although corporate media didn't mention the influence of climate change on Sandy's impacts, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, in a press briefing on Tuesday, did.
Anyone who says there's not a dramatic change in weather patterns, I think is denying reality. We have a new reality when it comes to these weather patterns.
While it can't yet be said that global warming caused Sandy, climate scientists for decades have predicted global warming would cause a trend toward more frequent intense weather events. Rising sea levels, warming oceans, these were all predicted previously.
As climate scientists love to say now, the climate is like a baseball player on steroids. He may hit a home run. You can't say that the steroids caused the home run, but he's certainly more likely to hit them when he's juiced up, and that's what we have now with our climate.
Climate scientist Kevin Trenberth, head of the U.S. National Center for Atmospheric Research, says storms like Hurricane Sandy are, quote, the new normal, part of the changed environment this storm is operating in, and all weather events now have a global warming component.
Our best wishes go out to all of those affected in the storm areas. Remember, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, listen to us on your mobile device via Stitcher Radio, find us and like us on the Facebook, and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Seen the lights go out on Broadway. I saw the Empire State lay low.
I've got an excellent idea for a very scary Halloween costume. I'll share it with you today on Hightower Radio. If you really want to scare people this Halloween, go trick-or-treating dressed as an Ohio voting machine. The black box e-vote machines that Ohioans will use on November 6th are owned by Hart InterCivic, but that disguises the real owner. Last year, Hart was taken over by an investment fund with a cryptic name of HIG Capital. Peek into HIG, and you'll find that of its 22 American directors, 21 are donors to Mitt Romney's campaign, and a third of them had been money managers at Bain & Company, the hedge fund that gave Mitt his start in corporate plundering. But the enigma within Ohio's machines goes even deeper than these cozy partisan ties suggest. For HIG itself is largely owned by an inscrutable private equity creature called Solomir. Who dat? Solomir was formed by Romney's oldest son, Tag, and financed by Mama Ann Romney and Uncle Scott Romney, with Papa Mitt himself chipping in $10 million and personally pitching Solomir to other rich investors. Like father, like son, Tag cloaks the fund's operations through a dark maze of offshore tax shelters. And now, the son has slipped out of Solomir to be a top campaign manager for his father. This slippery guy gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, playing tag. This is Jim Hightower saying, one wonders if Tag's campaign duties include monitoring Ohio's voting machines. Can the Romneys even spell conflict of interest? The people's trust in the fairness of our democratic elections has already been severely eroded by the unlimited corporate cash flooding into the process. But what are we to make of a multimillionaire presidential candidate with secret financial and crony control of the machines that can decide the outcome in this key swing state? I ask you, of all the things the Romneys could invest in, why voting machines?
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the Lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the Lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans. And to heal the planet. My promise is to help you and your family.
Yeah, Mitt, how are you going to do that? Mitt Romney speaking at the Republican National Convention in Tampa, Florida, where they just narrowly escaped a major hurricane, right? And gee, that was so funny. Or not. Yeah. In fact, should we play it again? From the debate Here's Mitt Romney.
Governor Romney, you've been a chief executive of state. I was just in Joplin, Missouri. I've been in Mississippi and Louisiana and Tennessee and other communities dealing with whether it's the tornadoes, the flooding, and worse. FEMA's about to run out of money, and there are some people who say do it on a case-by-case basis, and some people who say, maybe we're learning a lesson here that the states should take on more of this role. How do you deal with something like that?
Absolutely. Every time you have an occasion to take something from the federal government and send it back to the states, that's the right direction. And if you can go even further and send it back to the private sector, that's even better.
No, really, it isn't. Mitt Romney would like to privatize FEMA and privatize every governmental agency. He just said it. Actually, he said it in June during the CNN Republican primary debate. All right. I told you earlier, I posted a chapter of Atlas Drugged, Ayn Rand Be Damned on my blog last night at radioornot.com. It's there. I hope you will share it. I want to read to you a part of this chapter dealing with a fictional account in a Randian United States that's now known as the corporate states of America, in which there are no more governmental agencies, in which FEMA and the National Hurricane Center have been privatized. All right, here we go from Atlas Drugged. Monday, August 8th, 10 a.m., the White House Cabinet Room. President Cooper and Florida Governor Cott are meeting with the executive committee of the Corporate Council. Cooper is beaming. For the first time, he appears jubilant after the monumental embarrassment of the July 4th gala. He slowly looks around the room, shoots both arms over his head like an Olympian winning a gold medal, fists clenched, and proclaims, "Gentlemen, we're here to carve up a pie called Florida. It's huge, and each one of you can get in on the ground floor. There's no limit to how much money you can make. This is pure, free-for-all economics. The recent sweeping disaster is nothing less than the windfall we've all been waiting for, but could never have imagined or engineered. It's a godsend, my fellow patriots. The storm hit mostly the richest areas of the state. Those people have got insurance. Plus, they'll personally pay extra to do anything to get their property rebuilt. You're all going to have a whole state to privatize. It could become a model for the rest of the country. I don't mean to get carried away, but I'm sure you can see where this is going. If you play your cards right, you'll make profits you could never have dreamed of. Governor Cott, please share your thoughts with us. First, I'd like to ditto President Cooper's reading of the situation and the enormous, unprecedented riches that await you, says Cott. We're here to transform the state of Florida into Florida Incorporated. As the president said, if we play our cards right, and I see no reason why we wouldn't, we can wipe away the last vestiges of state government that have stood in our way of creating a pure corporate state. Governor Cott and I would now like to hear your thoughts on how we might proceed to create Florida Inc. Please feel free to speak up and share your ideas. Be bold. This is a unique time in our history, and we should let our imaginations run wild. With the right strategy, what happens in Florida won't stay in Florida, but it will set the pace for the rest of the CSA. Corporate states of America. That's 49 other ways for you to reap trillions of dollars. Yes, you heard me. That's trillions with a T. Gentlemen, I'm Jonathan Smythe of Consolidated Industries. First, let me say that I totally agree with you that we have an historic opportunity to achieve John Galt's vision. I've been imagining a corporate takeover scenario for years. I suggest that we turn Florida into 7 profit centers, individually owned and operated. He moves to the front of the room holding a map of the state. I've drawn a line up the middle of the peninsula, then one to the east, one east to west just south of Fort Pierce to Sarasota, and another just below Daytona Beach, past Ocala to the west coast. I've also drawn a north-south line east of Tallahassee, creating a zone from the capital to the Alabama border. In my proposal, those 7 profit centers would be for sale to the highest bidder. Members of the corporate council, of course. Corporations could own 1 or more, or all 7. What used to be called government would become Florida Inc., a board of directors made up of the owners of the zones. I love the overall concept, Jonathan, Cott governor of Florida says, but how do we take over existing government assets and the property and other assets of existing individuals and businesses? Governor, I've told you I've been running various scripts in my minds for years, including how we could sell the idea to the public. You could issue an executive order declaring the entire state a disaster. You could call it something like the Florida Humanitarian Relief and Restoration Initiative. In due time, you can get the legislature to approve establishing Florida Incorporated, a holding company, retroactively to tie it up neatly in a bow. Under the initiative, you would first declare the existing state bankrupt because it's self-insured and without the money to rebuild the physical structures it owns and to provide the services it has in the past. That would open up the door to sweeping privatization. In addition, private individuals and businesses would be given 60 days to establish their claims to real property. That's all we really care about, because with control of the land, we control everything. Under powers of eminent domain granted to you in the initiative, in the public interest, you would confiscate all undocumented property in the name of the state. Documented rights to property would be compensated at 10 cents on the dollar out of state funds, less whatever insurance companies pay out. Then you could open up the zones, like Smythe suggests, to the highest bidder. Harold Klein of International Networks gets up to speak. Mr. President, Governor, my fellow investors, what I've heard so far is encouraging, but let me remind you, we've got to keep our eye on the ball. We need to be practical and strategic, or we'll get creamed. Before we talk about which way to carve the lines of the profit zones, we've got to be absolutely clear that we can create a clean, swift, permanent basis upon which to confiscate everything in the name of Florida Incorporated. There can't be any backtracking. If we show any sign of weakness, the whole project will come tumbling down. After that, we can do whatever we wish. Our success will depend upon public relations, which have not gone all that well for us. May I remind you, the Adam case. We need an ironclad message that the people will swallow. I agree with everything that's been said already, says Aristotle Chorus. And I'd like to remind you that, as I emphasized when we last met, my investors have already put trillions of dollars on the table. Let me repeat, trillions, not billions, banking on the three-country European strategy that I've been putting together for the last 3 years. I am confident that we can add upwards of $500 billion to the Florida project. We've already run the preliminary numbers on what it would mean to our bottom line, especially because we can use the same tactics we've used in Europe in signing on to Florida Inc. As you may recall, after the November election, the Worldwide Investment Trust is ready to force countries, A, B, and C, you all know who they are, into default by calling loans they have no chance of repaying. In addition to everything that's been suggested, we can get the banks to do the same thing to property owners in Florida. Then we can seize them and open the bidding to privatize all public services and resources. Just like we're doing overseas, we can auction off power companies, seaports, airports, national lotteries, state-owned media, national banks, railway systems, and airports. Everything will be sold at fire sale prices. If there are any protests from state and private company workers who lose their jobs or will have to take a pay cut, they won't have a leg to stand on. Mortimer Gale of Gale's Department Store rises. Gentlemen, you know that in general I support everything you're saying and why you're saying it. You're talking about a grand scheme. But I've got an immediate problem. 20 of my department stores in Florida were completely destroyed, leveled, scattered like pickup sticks. From the way you're talking, you're going to put me out of business. I'm already losing millions. Mortimer, Governor Cott says, smiling. Mortimer, you know we always take care of our friends. Gale's department stores will be eligible for millions in corporate incentive grants, which you'll never have to repay. Just tell us how much you want and we'll open the spigot. In addition, choose the ideal locations where you'd like to relocate your stores, and we'll see to it that they're turned over to you. As you know, we have our ways. You don't have to be limited to places where you used to operate. Remember, the state will be a clean slate. It belongs to us, to you, to everyone in this room. You're in on the ground floor. President Cooper then says, Mortimer, of course I echo the governor. In addition to getting rid of all the regulations that have hindered development in recent years, Washington is declaring a moratorium on any and all existing rules that in any way would stand in the way of your free reign to build and rebuild. I am signing an executive order to that effect this afternoon. Consider Florida yours for the taking. Nice, huh? Within 10 days, says Governor Cott, you'll all be receiving a VIP copy of the auction catalog listing all resources and assets within Florida so you can bid on them. In addition, based upon the suggestions you've already made today, as well as those we've already received, we will be issuing a draft plan of Florida Inc. Governor Cott, Franklin Reynolds of Continental Health System, calls out as he rises to speak. There are literally millions of Floridians who remain stranded throughout the state. Daily, we're hearing reports of illnesses that could become epidemics if they haven't already. What's being done, or what do you plan to do to help those in such dire need? Governor Cott shaking his head and pursing his lips in disbelief. You have just uttered the most despicable word in the English language, help. I'd like to outlaw it. We don't help people. People help themselves. If you haven't understood that concept, if it doesn't already run through your veins, I don't understand what you're doing here. But Governor, Reynolds says, interrupting him, this is a public relations problem. If you don't do something to make it look as though you have a strategy to help people, sorry if you don't like the word, it could come back to haunt you as you implement Florida Inc. There are things you can do, window dressing, to stop any backlash that might hamper your efforts. I couldn't give a shit about threats of backlash, says Cott, and window dressing is for department stores. No offense, Mortimer. I came into office to continue and expand free-for-all economic policies and not to give an inch. This is no time to back down. This is no time to, I'm not going to waste time listing all the accomplishments I've had since I became state CEO. But I'd like to remind you, in case any of you have forgotten, that I have made Florida the most corporate-friendly state in the nation. Now I'm ready to take it to the next step by making it a pure corporate state. I'm delivering it to you on a silver platter now that it's dropped into our laps. Miss this opportunity, and there's no telling when another one may come our way. This is no time to back down. I've got total control of the Florida Peninsula, and I don't have to kowtow to anyone. Mr. Reynolds, the real story you should know is that the marketplace is already working precisely as it should throughout devastated Florida without the government needing to intervene. Private helicopter services are flying in supplies and selling water, tents, generators, and other essential equipment at competitive rates. They're also evacuating people who prefer and have the means to pay to leave. Amphibious craft are landing along the Florida coasts, bringing earth-moving equipment and other heavy equipment to clear areas for people who are willing to begin the reconstruction process. Many are willing to pay, even before their insurance companies do an assessment. So I hope you realize that the simple answer, the only answer to your question, is that Florida is helping those who can help themselves. Which means we help no one. Those who can't afford to pay the price have only themselves to blame. None of us was put on this earth to pick up every deadbeat and fall for every hard luck story. End of story. I'm amazed that we have to keep repeating the first principle of John Galt's restoration. But I guess that's just the cross those of us in leadership positions have to bear. Now, if you'll excuse the president and me, we've got some serious planning to do to maximize your bottom lines. As they leave, Aristotle Chorus runs up to Governor Cott and says, I've got a blank check for you from my international consortium as soon as you're ready to deal. There you go. There is a bit of the future. And let me put it firmly at the feet of Paul Ryan, who, if Mitt Romney is elected, would become vice president, who would be one heartbeat away from the presidency, who wants to see nothing more than a realization of a Randian dystopia, every man, woman, and child for his or herself, or I should say every corporation for itself. That's the future we're looking at. That's when we do not have a government. That's when corporations control everything. That's the future we're looking at when a storm devastates a good portion of the nation and the shock doctrine takes over. That's what we'll see. And I don't know about you, but it scares the living shit out of me. All right. Let's get John Amato on the line. John Amato, founder and publisher of Crooks and Liars, which still appears to be down. We'll find out the status of that, too, in addition to whatever else John wants to talk about today, if he's awake. Dun, dun.
Hello.
Hey, John Amato, how you doing?
I am pretty good. My website is down because of Hurricane Sandy.
I know. I've been trying to access it all morning, and Crooks and Liars is down. Where are your servers located?
Well, they're a bit scattered, but there's a lot of data in New York.
Yeah.
And we're, hosting the building with Daily Kos is hosted, Tom Hartman, Blog Ads, and a bunch of people. And unfortunately, it's not like the servers are underwater. We had a problem, obviously, like most of the internet had a problem, yesterday, the day before, but ours was brief, and because something blew out. And now something else just went out, so they're getting there to replace it. It's not irrevocable kind of damage, but
no, it'll come up. But you know what? There are so many. I know Huffington Post was down for at least part of the day yesterday. I don't know if they're still down. Alternet is down today.
Everybody's going down because there's just a lot of data centers in New York.
Yeah. Thankfully, RadioOrNot.com is still up. I'm not sure where we're hosted, but we're going. We're okay, so that's good. I just read a chapter, and I don't know if you read the book or not. I know Howie Klein, who's your colleague over at Blue America, has been as enamored of this book as I am. This by Stephen Goldstein, Atlas Drugged, Ayn Rand Be Damned, and in it, Stephen Goldstein was very, very prescient in an eerie kind of way. In that there's a scene. The story takes place 67 years after John Galt's restoration. Picks up where
I
Atlas.
read that part.
Okay, and
I think I read what you're talking about.
So a massive storm. A massive hurricane hits Florida. He just had the location wrong. But people aren't forewarned as to how big and dangerous the storm was going to be because the National Hurricane Center had already been privatized in the corporate states of America. And so, after the storm devastates the state, the vultures are waiting to pounce and put the shock doctrine into action. So the chapter I just read is where all these corporate interests get together and figure out how they're going to divvy up the state and turn it into Florida Inc. This is Mitt Romney's vision, isn't it? He wants to privatize FEMA. In his ideal world, as he said in the debate, in an ideal world, we break up FEMA, we send it back to the states, and ideally we give it back to the private sector. So what is it? You pay for protection?
Well, and in the chapter about the Florida, storm, is that 2/3 of Florida is lost and people are underwater.
Yeah.
And basically the president is saying, oh, well, it's up to the states. They'll get around to it. And the reporters are asking, well, people are drowning. Shouldn't you help them? Oh, please, how could you go back to that socialist state of mind?
We don't. I don't like the word help.
How dare you? How dare you say that? That's horrible. It's like they'll get. You know what? They should help themselves. The states have plenty of resources.
Yep.
And it's like it is hysterical. But it's it's like an abstract version. It's the truth of what would happen. Now but it's awful, and it's amazing that this type of a vision of American society would have stuck on anybody. Back in the day with Republicans, and they were very different Republicans back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And but for like an idiot like Greenspan to be one of her Tea Party compadres just helped make her live. And I don't understand how any person who has any compassion for a human being could be an Ayn Rand.
I don't either. And we must remember, as much as Paul Ryan denies it, there is video of Paul Ryan speaking to the Atlas Society, bragging about the fact that it is required reading in his office, his congressional office, of all staffers and interns, to read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and he jokes about what order they read them in. But this is his philosophy. This is what guided him. He talks about it in this speech, how this guided his political life. I mean,
it's like, could you imagine if Obama had told like some of the staff to read like Karl Marx? what would Fox News be doing with this? That would be the top story every day for like 6 months.
Yeah. No,
right?
I know.
But Republicans, suck on Ayn Rand, and like it's no big deal other than a day of questioning.
Right. No, I hear you. Now, then you got people, I call it opposite world. John Amato with us, a publisher, founder of Crooks and Liars. Yesterday, there was a debate in Massachusetts where Michelle Bachmann's congressional seat is at risk, thank God. And so during this debate, she actually elicited hysterical laughter from the audience when she said, "I don't engage in political talk." Listen, here, I've got the audio.
So yes, I've very much been a part of the solution, and it's insulting to say that these are political speech, because that's one thing I do not do, is political speech. I want to we're going to switch gears.
Oh my God! Good for them. I think people are finally wising up, and I hope this is the case. If they're not buying her shit, hopefully they're not buying Mitt's shit either.
Well, let's hope, but it's going to be a long, dark day in this country with the conservative movement. But the fact that she's a laughingstock. Now, I would say that normally, but there you go, in her own state, they're laughing at her because she is a laughingstock. Just think of the Republican conservative intellectuals that lead their party. Michelle Bachmann. I mean, she's stunningly inept. I won't get too heavy on the attacks this morning.
That's
but
okay.
She is just politically and inept. It's amazing to me. I lose words trying to describe how any party or any serious political movement could have people like Steve Klein, like Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry. We've seen such buffoons that take the stage, and Herman Cain. I mean, Herman Cain was leading for a while. He was leading Mitt Romney.
The entire clown car was leading because they did not want Mitt Romney. Remember, he is their candidate of last resort. He's just the last man left standing.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be a close election, but because there's obvious reasons as liberals why we were unhappy. But then, with Obama's presidency, but then, and it has nothing to do with the criticism that he's received from the media and of course conservative media, but it's like just been foolhardy what we have to put up with. It's crazy.
It is stunning. Now, John Amato, let me ask you this: have you been following the right-wing attacks on Nate Silver?
Oh yeah. Well, I haven't. I've read some of the stories. Which is like his model is flawed because because
he's effeminate. I mean, that's the kind of shit they're saying. He's effeminate. He looks gay. He can't be right.
Yeah, I haven't seen the gay thing, but I didn't have a chance to focus on his story.
Right.
I just know, it's a tactic that they've been using for the last couple of months, which is to just say the polls are liars and it's all liberal bias, and it's a way to try to get it. What they feel is to keep their Republican enthusiasm gap going, but it's really a shame. I mean, it's not like I have any skin in the game on Nate Silver's behalf,
right?
But it is just, I mean, nobody's criticized this guy's work, and actually Howie has looked at some of his stuff in his congressional, polling numbers or his the way he figures things out, and he has not always been a fan of Nate Silver's. But that doesn't mean when we're talking about national polls, it's a much bigger difference than when you're talking about House races. And he's doing averages of polls, which are more accurate than one particular poll. I mean, how could there's Elizabeth Warren beating Scott Brown, by 6-8 points, for the last 6 weeks. Suddenly a poll comes out and they're tied. Like, how did he make up 8 points? Right? Nothing happened. There was no debate. There was no, campaign snafu. There wasn't some racist remark by you can't lose 8 points in the polls over nothing.
Right.
In one poll. It's impossible. So, so there are, your outliers of a poll here or there that will get it, will be wrong. But, so I don't know. Tell us more. What other criticisms is he getting?
Oh, did I say Massachusetts? Joni on Twitter says that I said Michelle Bachmann's in Massachusetts. It wasn't.
Oh, no, I thought you said Minnesota.
I thought I said Minnesota too, but somebody on Twitter said I said Massachusetts. No, I believe me, I know that Michelle Bachmann's in Minnesota, and hopefully Minnesota, will realize. Bill Clinton spoke in Minnesota yesterday, and I've been playing a clip today about. From Romney at the RNC, his big speech where he chided President Obama for, here's what he said.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans.
And this is funny. And, hold on.
And to heal the planet.
And this is funny?
My promise is to help you and your family.
I think right now millions of people around the country are saying, yeah, if I want our president to try to heal the planet, and that certainly would help my family right now.
I don't understand. It's like this, to be a Republican contender, right? You have to be an abortion denier. You have to be an evolution denier. You have to be a climate change denier. I mean, you have to be a denier of most everything that's proven scientifically is true. So it's the conservative ideology of buffoons.
Yeah. No, you're right, and I'm stunned. Look, first, I do not follow Mitt Romney on Twitter, but his tweets keep crossing my stream. I guess people are retweeting them in my stream. So look, the hypocrisy of his lies and everything about Mitt Romney spells hypocrisy. The fact that he claims to be this religious freak. I'm sorry, and yet he has no shame in just lying constantly and consistently. It's the only thing he does consistently is lie. And
right, so, well, to him, lying for
lying for the Lord, right? Lying for the Lord is okay.
It's not forbidden. Mormons don't believe in the same things religiously that regular Catholics, Christians, or most religions believe in. So his idea of what's the whole abortion, which was kind of hysterical. And I did a post on this months ago. Was when he was on with the late Meet the Press.
Tim Russer. Tim Russer,
who died.
Tim Russer.
And Tim Russer. And Russer asked him, "Do you believe in the Republican Party platform that life begins conceived at conception?" And Romney had a stumble. He was like, "Well, as far as on a political line, like on a political, where to say it begins for a political line, I'll agree. But as far as theology goes, I can't comment on that." Well, he couldn't comment on it because the Mormon theology is that life doesn't start at conception. It starts in premortal times, and you're born as spirit children, thousands of years before you're ever born here. So he couldn't, obviously say what his true Mormon beliefs are. And that's that. And so, Mormons, they have all their secret temple rites. It's veiled in secrecy. And they knew from early on for them to survive because they're they have so many bizarre ordinances that people shouldn't know about it because then they'd be ostracized more. And back then, obviously there was a lot more persecution for crazy religions, or what I think is a con game, but whatever. And so they learned to keep it, to lie about things is okay if it's going to further the church.
Right, and that's it. And we must say that, Mormon doctrine, one of their stated goals is to have a Mormon in the White House, a Mormon presidency.
Joseph Smith ran for president.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that, it was because he knew the power it wields, and in his time, much more powerful in his time, and it would expand the church. I mean, it's a recruiting tool.
Right. Well,
the whole idea we hear that Romney and his sons have foreign policy experience because of their missionary work. Yeah, going door to door and trying to convert somebody to be a Mormon. That's real missionary work. That's called that's Jehovah's Witness.
Right. No, you're right. Well, but let's take it to the next step and talk about reality from Mormon teachings, right? Their goal is to have a Mormon president of the United States and to infiltrate all levels of government. That's why we see an inordinate number of Mormons in the alphabet agencies, in the CIA and the FBI and the other governmental agencies. There's lots of Mormons there. But then their scripture, I guess, their teachings tell them that once they have a Mormon president, this Mormon will then go to Jackson County, Mississippi, and Jesus will return and they will rule the world together from the new American Garden of Eden.
Right. I mean, Joseph Smith had said that it was going to be a Mormon president that was going to lead the country to salvation, and so look, with these prophecies, they try to make them happen. So it is kind of scary and kooky in certain, in a lot of ways. I don't know if I wrote it, but Romney's got to go to like 3-hour mass every Sunday.
Really?
And because Mormons, that's how like they indoctrinate the children. It's like they're in the services, from 3 years old.
Right.
And they go with the family, and there's a segment that runs children from 3 years old to 11-year-olds. Right. And so they have their own branch of what they do during Sunday mass. And then 11, obviously, till elders, and then you become stakeholders and all that other stuff. But I've never seen a religion that obviously some really heavy forms of Judaism and whatnot, but where your kids are basically forced to go and then are thoroughly indoctrinated into their religion. So by the time they're 10 years old, that's all they know.
Right. And then, by the way, when they turn 12, boys and girls alike are sent into private meetings with the bishop, of which, Mitt was one, and so he has done this, where they grill these kids on every aspect of their lives, including their masturbatory habits. And I've read enough accounts on exmormon.org, the message boards of parents who were mortified by the fact that their young daughters were called into these meetings with the bishop, sleazy old men who asked them. And one father wrote this post that I'll never forget, because my daughter's 13, so I can sympathize that this guy, his daughter came home and said, what's masturbation? But
right.
Because this sleazy old guy had been grilling her about what she does to herself. I'm sorry.
I don't know, half of those guys are just dreaming what it would have been like, in polygamous times.
Yep, I'm sure.
Because they'd be lining up their new wives. But it's like they oversee your whole entire life. And remember, like, Mitt Romney, right? I mean, now there's video out the Murray Wass, dug up for the Boston Globe, where Mitt, like, they hate homosexuality. And to them it's a disease. And so Mitt, when marriage was passed in Massachusetts, Mitt refused to change the birth certificates he had. Instead of printing up different ones, he had them, handwrite and cross off things on the paperwork, which then doesn't make it official. And he also, felt that children were at risk to gay parents. And then if there was a surrogate born to gay parents, he thought that that those children would have brain damage, essentially, if they were brought up by gays. So it's really a sickness, that's taught early on. And if any of your listeners have ever watched Big Love, they actually they do most of the Mormon rites and rituals, to perfection. And there's just a whole season thread about a guy being gay and what it does to him in the Mormon, because they have they try to teach them out of it, and which doesn't work, obviously. And so it leads to people committing suicide.
Oh, it's stunning. John Amato of Crooks and Liars, we've only got a few minutes left. Any thoughts on how the storm is going to affect voting, or what we might see a week from today? We'll be talking about what happened on Election Day.
Right. Well, I wouldn't doubt that the political operatives now are trying to figure out, okay, when the power comes back, can we screw up certain districts, and either depending if it's leaning towards Obama, if it's in a Republican state, how do we not let them get vote access to voting machines, right?
Right.
And then make sure in the heavily Republican districts that voting machines are heavily, they get to the good stuff. So I mean, overall, it helps Obama big time, and Governor Christie's been a great, he's been a great campaign surrogate for Obama the last 2 days, which doesn't help Romney. And so, things like this, when you're, it's bad for a challenger, against an incumbent, when you're getting, sort of the rise of attention and sort of the flow is going your way and you're, making a comeback. When something happens a week before the election or a couple of days before the election, it seems to stymie that, that drive that you have going on, where Mitt Romney's had to be on the outs, and not only since he's forced to do a phony donation drive thing,
right.
It's actually campaign
so
stuff in
disgusting.
Ohio, give canned food.
Yep.
He and to me, if he wanted to do that, why is he going to a fucking Ohio? Excuse my language. He should be running to New Jersey or to Virginia and to Pennsylvania to try to help people if that was his intent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it helps the president. And I have a post actually scheduled for today that hopefully readers will see, where Tucker Carlson was on Special Report with Bret Baier on Fox News, and he tried to say that the storm would have a negative effect on Obama because, people would see the bad images and they'd realize everything's amiss in America, even the weather, because of Obama. And so, Bret Baier, I've never seen him do this before, which is challenge one of his panel members. And he's like, okay, wait a second. Let me play devil's advocate.
Wow.
You're saying Americans are going to blame Obama for the storm? And then he's going, oh, no, I'm just saying a few people. This is the straits that they're going to be like, to make believe that everything helps Romney.
Right.
So by that, it's helping Obama. But we'll just have to see. I mean, it's tightening up, and people just have to go out and vote, and that's the biggest deal is the power and how will voting machines be set up.
I hear you. And so there you go. Get out and vote. John Amato of Crooks and Liars, hopefully it'll be back up. Have a very happy Thanksgiving. Don't OD on candy, okay?
That's tonight. I bought so much chocolate. I'll be eating 10 pieces today, guaranteed.
Yep. All right. We're out of time. I'll talk to you next week, the
Okay,
day after
bye-bye.
Election Day. Bye. And that does it for us for today. Stay safe tonight. Talk to you tomorrow, radio or not. Bye.
'Cause you're mine.